All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into something pretty wild. It's from this cryptic online text, and the title alone is a huge statement. The mass was never missing. I mean, that's a direct challenge to, one of the biggest puzzles in physics. So what's this all about? Let's get into it.
So right out of the gate, the source hits us with this. They mapped the void, but the signal came from beyond. Whoa, that's designed to pull you right in, isn't it? The implication here is just massive. It's suggesting that maybe, just maybe, our entire understanding of the universe is built on a huge misunderstanding of what we're actually seeing. And that really sets up the core question of this whole thing. Are we looking for something that's missing, or are we just completely misreading what's right in front of us? This text we're breaking down today, it argues for the second option. It's saying the problem isn't about what we can't find, it's about what we're refusing to see. Okay, so what's the actual argument here? Well, the source puts forward a pretty radical alternative to one of the biggest head-scratchers in all of physics.
So here's where things get really interesting. On one hand, you've got mainstream physics. They see all these weird gravitational effects and say, okay, there must be some invisible stuff in our universe we can't see. Let's call it dark matter. But this source, it says, nope, you've got it all wrong. It claims the mass isn't missing, it's misrecognized. So what on earth does that mean? Well, it means the gravity we're feeling isn't coming from some hidden stuff inside our universe, it's coming from something completely outside of it. And how does that even work? The source has a pretty wild explanation for this. It introduces this idea it calls gravitational bleed-through. And yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like, interference from other dimensions.
So the first big concept they throw at us is dimensional interference. The theory is basically this, that gravitational pull we've been calling dark matter, it's not ours. It's actually leaking or bleeding through from another reality, a whole different universe that's somehow interacting with ours.
Okay, so how does this bleeding through actually happen? This is where they bring in a term called brane convergence, which is an idea borrowed from string theory. So try to picture this. Our universe is like a giant flat sheet, a brane. The theory goes that there are other universes, other branes, existing parallel to ours, almost like pages in a book. And when these cosmic sheets get close and sort of press against each other, it creates gravitational ripples that we can feel in our universe. And according to this source, those are the forces we're mistaking for dark matter.
Right, so if this is all happening, if gravity's leaking from another dimension, why haven't we heard about it? Why isn't this front page news? Well, according to this source, it's no accident. They claim there's a deliberate effort to cover it up, something they call the containment ritual. And this is a really provocative claim. This containment ritual, as they call it, is supposed to be this deliberate, systematic process where institutional physics knowingly mislabels the evidence. Instead of admitting it's an influence from another universe, they frame it as a mystery within our own universe. So what are they supposedly containing? They call it multiversal residue. That's their term for all the evidence. The gravitational echoes, the signals that are leaking in from these other realities.
Okay, at this point, you're probably wondering the same thing I was. What is this document? Is it a scientific paper? Some fringe theory manifesto? Well, funny enough, the source actually tells us exactly what it is, and it's probably not what you're thinking.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right? And the source's own disclaimer gives a really surprising answer that kind of reframes everything we've just talked about.
Get this, it doesn't call itself a theory, it doesn't call itself a paper, it calls itself a sovereign diagnostic disclaimer. That is a mouthful. But what it's doing is really clever. It's basically stepping outside the entire game of science. It's not asking for peer review, it's not looking for proof, it's saying, I'm not a scientific document, I'm something else entirely, a tool for a different kind of diagnosis. And it even breaks down its own purpose into this three-part framework. First, it's a cinematic indictment, which is a very dramatic way of saying it's accusing the scientific establishment of something. Second, it calls itself a mythic infrastructure. This is key. It's not trying to be science, it's trying to be a new foundational story, like a myth for the modern age. And finally, it's a sovereign broadcast, a message that's totally independent, not coming through any official channels.
And its goals are just as cryptic. It says it's here to expose that ritualized containment we just talked about. Then it mentions actor convergence, which sounds like it's saying different groups are secretly working together. And finally, systemic erosion, which, well, that sounds a lot like it's talking about how our trust in big institutions is falling apart. So you see, this is clearly about way more than just physics. It's a critique of how we know anything.
And that brings us to its really powerful closing idea. It says, the universe isn't expanding into emptiness. It's reacting to unseen convergence. So the idea here is that our universe isn't just passively expanding into a void. No, it's actively reacting to these other realities that are pressing in all around us.
So we're left with this really fascinating question. By calling itself a myth, this whole thing neatly sidesteps the need for scientific proof, right? It's asking us to judge it as a story, not as a set of facts. And that makes you wonder, what's the real power of a story that's designed not just to explain the universe, but to challenge the very systems we use to explain everything?